Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. Little nuggets after every practice, so that still continues. Go check that out on ESPN.com. Also, we'll have kind of an explainer about why we're in this Terry McLaurin situation and just kind of like analyzing the whole situation and why it's always been a tricky one, which is what I've been saying long before camp opened, that it was going to be tricky and it remains that way. And I'll explain on ESPN.com a lot of reasons why. So check that out. I think that'll be out on Monday, but it'll be out there very early in the week, if nothing else. So anyway, here's a practice report. And oh, by the way, the John Keim Report is presented by AAA and my friends at Huel. Try their Black Edition. You know, I love the strawberry banana and the chocolate. 40 grams of protein, 27 vitamins and minerals. A great way to start the day. You can go to huel-DOT-com, use the password KEIM, K-E-I-M. If you're a new customer, you get 15% off, but you got to read the terms and conditions first. Anyway, check them out. So let's get, and in a minute, I'm going to have my AAA player of the week. So I'll give you that in a couple minutes. All right, so the Commanders returned to practice, and as you know, Dan Quinn was not happy the other night. I don't know that I can say we saw, it wasn't a padded practice, so you didn't see like this incredible extra amount of intensity and all that. I'm sure in meetings, a lot of that, that's where you're getting after it. They weren't out there bruising each other because of this. That's not their style. But do you have a crisper practice? Do you do all that? I think what we see in that second game and what they see, how they progress throughout the week will be very telling because that was, and the one thing with Quinn is one thing I really appreciated from the other night, and I said this in the podcast, that they didn't play 30 guys. There are 30 guys who aren't playing. There are going to be key players for them. And yet all he cared about was like that wasn't good enough. And that's how you should think, because even if they're just backups, you can still play a certain way. You might lose, but you can still look and play a certain way. And they did not look like that at all. So big week for them. Listen, some of this stuff will be forgotten down the road, but if you don't translate that into something better, that's not a good sign either. So anyway, the one thing they did do is they did work out 7 players after practice. And, some of them, let me see, I know some of them, some veteran linebackers, Nicholas Morrow, Tanner Muse, Duke Riley, Sione Takitaki, and Oshane Jimenez. So those are some of the guys. They're bigger guys. Those are the guys that have been out, that the names are out there, but don't know what's going to happen with that. Not obviously they work out guys a lot. They do have Lucas Niang, towards ACL, so they do have a spot that they could fill somebody. One thing they're not doing is bring in another kicker. Dan Quinn was asked about that. They're okay with the kicker situation right now. Listen, man, if something happens later in camp, then you can always bring in someone else. Like teams don't like to bring in multiple kickers during a camp because then you're taking away a roster spot somewhere else. What you can see is throughout the year, like look at what they did last year. They still had a good year. Their kicking game was helped them, and they were bringing in guys all the time. That's the life of a kicker in the NFL. So that's why the teams just don't like to waste 2 roster spots if they can avoid it on kickers. Because again, if you're doing that, then maybe you're not looking at another corner, safety, whatever. And kickers are always available, especially after final cuts. Nobody keeps 2 kickers. Now, if you don't know who your guy is, then you bring in a couple guys sometimes. But if you have a guy like they did with Matt Gay, you're not going to bring in that second guy unless there's something really going wrong. And it's funny because he missed the kick the other night. Up until the last few days before that, he was actually doing pretty well until the last week. And then he's had a couple misses in camp, and then he had that one. So needs a good finish here to kind of quell any sort of concerns by anybody. So obviously no Terry McLaurin again today. Shocker. Noah Brown. I'll get to the 7 injured guys in a minute. One thing that Dan Quinn talked about too is I think where they feel good about the depth right now is running back, tight end, defensive line. He brought up corners, how he feels that group is stronger. He brought up safeties as well. So that means like with the receivers, and I kept saying that last year at this time, we're wondering, okay, who's going to be their second receiver? Who's going to be their number 2 receiver? Now it's like, okay, when McLaurin and Noah Brown are back, who's their number 4 receiver? Here's the thing, like, and McLaurin will be here at some point. Keep in mind, like, he's under contract. So if you're under contract, there's 2 things. One, you miss game checks if you don't report if they can't work out an extension. So you miss game checks. Two, the worst thing you can do at this stage is sit out for any length of time because you're only hurting yourself. You believe that you're worth a certain amount in the market. You're not helping yourself by sitting out and missing games. You need to go out and prove what you can do at this stage, that nothing has changed, and that if you want that sort of deal, you've got to go out and produce for 17 weeks. So anyways, my point is he'll be out here. Noah Brown, we don't know. Like, we haven't seen a whole lot of him this camp as he's coming off the knee injury. He had the kidney issue at the end of season in the season, but also a knee injury in the spring. And he was back out here early, but we haven't seen him in a little bit. So I don't know what's going on with him. Dan Quinn said last week that none of these injuries are serious. So, but when Noah Brown will be out there, I don't know. He has an injury history, and that's what concerns me. So and I get to that group because this is why you need somebody else to start to emerge and become maybe a solid number 4 for them. So if something happens to Brown, or if you just want to, Deebo Samuel's the chess piece. So if you want to have someone else out there with McLaurin, when take Deebo out, who is that guy? McCaffrey hasn't separated. Jalen Lane is a rookie, and he's had a good camp, but we're not talking about like some unbelievable camp at this point. I like him a lot as a punt returner. You know that. And then like the other guys like Gallup and Osborne, nobody's really separated. Chris Moore, if you could hold on the ball, maybe he would be that guy, but he hasn't done that. So that's where, like last year at this time in camp, Olamide Zaccheaus looked really good. And he's still the guy that I'm really, really surprised is not back out here, because he was a guy that Dan Quinn loved. And it just, that's not a good one, because he could have helped. Anyways, that's where we're at that. But somebody needs to start separating from that group. So that way, if something does happen to Noah Brown, or, and I like Jalen Lane because he's a rookie, he can develop and progress. But, you need to see that in a game. And same thing for McCaffrey. So just haven't seen it enough. Today was Military Appreciation Day. Several thousand military families were out, not military, several thousand people were out here, hundreds of military families. So this is always a big event for them, and today was no different. Now to the injury updates. Dan Quinn said that they will, first of all, they don't have to give injury updates right now. So if a guy is like Niang is out for the year with an ACL, they told us that. Everybody else, you don't have to give injury updates. So they are not going to give injury updates. They'll keep pushing it off. So the other night, Dan Quinn said he'd talk about it Sunday. Well, now he says he'll talk about it Tuesday when they get back, because Monday is going to be a very light workout. So Tuesday's the day where they get back. And then we'll probably, so at that point, we may find out again on Saturday, see who maybe will play in that Bengals game, the second preseason game. Bottom line, though, is none of those 7 guys who missed the game were on the field today. So that means like Coleman, again, Noah Brown, Jordan McGee, those guys were not, none of those guys were on the field. Bill Krosky-Merritt was on the field, so he had hurt his shoulder. Bobby Price, it was checked for concussion. He was not on the field. It was not on the field today. So there you go. Now, before I keep going to the practice stuff, just give you a quick AAA player of the week. And to me, it's corner Trey Amos. And I say him because of the consistency that he showed. And it was in the joint practice, but it was also in the game as well. Just really good coverage. Kid is coming along very nicely, a very good pick for them. And that's why I said it. Like Laramie Tunsil had a terrific joint practice session, but because he doesn't play in the game, Amos did. He had a couple, just defends balls very well. And it defends the fade route very well. And I think that's why, like, he's looked really good. He's everything you could have hoped for from a pick. I mean, he looks like a first round corner, and that to me is probably where he should have. And that's where I thought he would go for sure. So they got great value there, and just a really, really good pick. But he is my AAA player of the week. All right. So let's get to the practice report. And one of the things they were doing on the offensive line is they're rotating guys, because you still have, again, Brandon Coleman still out, obviously Sam Cosmi out. So the first group at line was Tunsil and then Andrew Wiley at left guard. And then, of course, Biadasz, Allegretti, and Connolly. And I actually think like the Coleman situation, his injury, the one silver lining for that is Wiley's been playing over there. So he's going to be a big time swing guy, guard and tackle. But also it gives Connolly more reps with the first group against the first group. That's a good thing. And I think he's developing nicely. The other thing that happened is when they would take Tunsil out and they would put Wiley at left tackle, Chris Paul went into left guard. Paul, I felt like did a nice job the other night, early on especially, shows his strength. Dude has strong hands. It's something they've talked about here for several years. And like a couple of years ago, the defensive line, I'd hear from defensive linemen talking about how strong his hands were, or they would tell coaches like, hey, this dude's hands are unbelievable, right? So like you saw that the other night, you saw a little bit of that today, but you also see the movement skills. That's where the big question for him will be. And that's a big part of this offense. So that's always going to be the question for him. Does he have that? So again, the other night, there was some question on that. How does that progress through the preseason? Because that will be the number one key for him for sure. Allegretti has worked at right guard all of training camp with the ones. And then again, when Coleman's back, I'll be curious to see what they do at the right tackle spot. But I do like how Connolly has progressed over the last week. One of the things that, when you watch, as like when I like to watch these drills, and I talked a lot about Zach Ertz or some other guys. So today I'm watching like Austin Ekeler. So you just watch him go through, he's just going through almost like he's going through the playbook, or maybe what they're going to do today, going through some routes and running some routes, just getting his footwork down on the routes. And then you'll see him kind of talking to himself afterwards. And I'm running some video of this now, but you see him talking to himself, just kind of like maybe just going over in his head what to do. And then also you see him lining up as in the backfield, the running back, taking a handoff and how he cuts through the hole. So like those, when you watch that, like guys like that, that's why they're very prepared, and they go through all these drills before they get to the practice field. Now this is taking place when others are working on some special teams work. It was not involving kick return, so he didn't have to be there, but it allows him to do them. And the guys that last do stuff like this, like they're always prepared. Ertz, then you watch like Marshawn Lattimore, Mikey Samerstill, like just watching them catch some passes along the sidelines as if they were like running down the side with the receiver. Coach would just throw the ball up, they turn around and they catch it, right? And now, is it a fancy drill? No, but it is something that you get used to it, right? So turn, find the ball, get your feet in bounds because you're right along the sidelines. So anyways, I enjoy watching that stuff because I think all that stuff, like then it translates to the game. The more you do it, the more you condition your body, but that's what they do. And watching Ekeler, that's exactly what he's done too. After practice, I was watching Dietrich Wise work with Foster Sorrell. Now, Sorrell may or may not make the roster. So this, when you bring in guys like Wise, like it's all about leadership. Like that was the reputation he had up in New England. And so after practice, I'm watching him work with Sorrell a little bit. And then after they're done working, just see him putting his arm around Sorrell and just kind of talking to him, maybe giving him a little encouragement. I don't know what he says, of course, but that's how it appeared. And Sorrell had, he's a big dude, man. He is a big dude. So there are definitely times where that size comes in handy. And then other times where you notice the lack of footwork for sure. So like that's something, but working with Wise, a guy like that, says a lot that he's willing to work with a guy who, again, may or may not make the roster, or he may be a practice squad guy. But when you have guys willing to do that, that is how you get better. All right, Jeremy Lane, punt returner. Like again, the one thing I'll say from the other night, and I talked about this a little bit afterwards, I don't care about the yardage total for him, because what I looked at, and it's funny because again, talking to be Mitch, but this is one of the things that I looked at and liked is the willingness to return the ball. Because the first one, if he makes one guy miss, that is a long run, and I'll take that. Like I'll take that 1 yard game to get maybe a couple 60 or 70 yarders down the road. So he may average sometimes 14 yards in a game, but you may get a couple ones or twos and you're going to break off a 30 or 40, right? Because he's willing to take, he's not a risk taker, but he's aggressive. And I like that because that's how you get those big runs. But again, that one the other night, you break that first one, that first step, now you've got to run, but his willingness to do that makes a difference. If all you're doing is fair catching, you can look at it and say later, like, oh, I should have done this, but you didn't. This guy will do this because that was what he was known for at Virginia Tech. The coaches talked about that, about how fearless he was. And so I think that's going to really translate well with some big runs for sure. Again, it could be a 70-yarder, and then the next time it might be 0, but that's 35 yards per return. But that's how you get them. It's the mindset that gets you there. And that's what I think he definitely has. And, Connolly, again, I like what I've seen from him, how he's developing. They just, and I'll get to him in a minute, but the offense still had some struggles again. I think that's just going to be the case as long as you're not having two of your top three receivers out there. But you do see things like, again, the red zone, there were some red zone struggles. Keep in mind, Terry McLaurin had the second most red zone touchdown catches in the NFL last season, second in overall touchdowns, second in red zone touchdowns. So when he comes back out there, a lot of issues will be resolved because that's who he is. And again, the key thing is he's under contract. So if he doesn't play, there is no money coming to him. And, so they're not going to keep him on the PUP list. They're going to take him off at some point to get him ready because he needs to ramp up for the season. And, listen, it could very well be that you take them off the PUP list after they start closing practices. So that way we're not watching all the stuff and making a big deal out of it, which I don't blame them, right? Because why not? Like, right now, if he's out there and he's not doing anything, where are the cameras going to be? They're going to be at watching when you're pointing at 17. Now, when they go to close practices, we'll see about 20 minutes or so. And then they get into their they'll see stretching. We'll see a couple, maybe one or two drills, and that's about it. Anyways, that's just a theory. I have no clue if that's what's going to be, but it does make sense because you've got to start getting him ready and getting him out in the field with his teammates if you do expect him to play. And again, he's under contract. Whether you like it, the situation or not, he's under contract. If he doesn't play, it's on Terry. So, they've got to get a deal done. I know that that's both sides, but the decision not to play would just be on Terry's alone, and that doesn't help his cause, and it doesn't help the team. A couple things from the 11 on 11, again, no pads today, but I did like a block by Lane and Austin Ekeler on an end around by Deebo Samuel. Both of them did a good job down there. Watched Javon Kinlaw absolutely took it to Chris Paul. Violent play by Javon Kinlaw. Just instant pressure, just big, quick, instant pressure. He does flash. Now, he's not, again, the consistency with him is what I would want, is what I'm going to pay attention to, but he did flash, and he flashed today. So there you go. Jayden Daniels, perfect ball to Deebo Samuel, the corner of the end zone, just on another fade over the top of Mikey Samerstill. Next play, slant to Deebo versus Samerstill. This connection is still developing, but one thing that Terry McLaurin said that somebody asked him, I think it was Nicky asked him, like, when did you see the connection with Deebo really start to form? He said on the first play from training camp, on the first day of training camp, where he hit him on a deep ball. So, but the other thing, because like I did ask him too, like, how have you seen it grow and develop? He said the one thing that's happening is Deebo is now starting to understand how Jayden sees things on the field. They have good communication because as he said, they need to be on the same page with how they see things. But because Jayden is such a good communicator, that really helps. And Deebo is as well. So that's why he has good connection with Terry McLaurin, great communicator. Zach Ertz, great communicator. Like, it's no coincidence that he has great connection with those guys. I think that's going to help with Deebo Samuel as well. And, so you already see it. And there was one throw he missed today to him, but you do see the connection developing, and you do see how they want to get Deebo Samuel the ball in many ways. And so that's what's taking place. I also like watching the arm talent of Jayden Daniels. And again, that doesn't just mean arm strength. Arm talent is quick release, etc. So there was a play today where looks to the right, looks back to the middle real quick, and boom, Jacoby Jones open, boom, ball is out. That's the arm talent. So it's see it, get rid of it right now. Some guys see it, process, then try and throw it, play is dead. See it, boom, touchdown. Actually, that one was inside the 5, I believe. The funny thing is, like, when I'm watching Daniels work with the starters, I'm also watching Josh Johnson behind, about 15 yards behind the play, going through the mental reps of the play, just calling things out and just dropping back and making his read just based on what he sees from back there. So those are mental reps. Speaking of the backup quarterbacks, Sam Hartman, again, did not look great the other night, did not look extremely sharp today. Clearly knows the offense. I just wonder about that arm strength. He had the shoulder surgery. Again, sometimes sometimes it looks like it's not all the time, but sometimes all upper body. And so you're not getting the same zip on the ball, but there's just some inaccuracies that are developing. That could also be the result of the shoulder surgery. And, just when you have a bad shoulder, it can change how you throw things, right? If you've ever had a shoulder issue, and I've had them, it can change how you do things. And I just wonder if he's working through some of that still. But you have to say, if you're keeping 3 right now, it has to be Josh Johnson, whether he's on the active roster or if he's your number 3 who's on the practice squad, but he has to be number 3 in line, because that's just the way it's looked so far. All right. So again, then we get to Johnson did have a nice slant to Michael Strawn on one play too. So just thought I'd notice that. 11 on 11 in the red zone. Watch Connolly against Frankie Louvu. Also saw him against Von Miller. Good job now Louvu was really quick around the edge, but it looked like, now this is one where I'd like to watch film to see like, okay, if this were a game, what would have happened? But what I did see is it looked like sometimes early in camp, Connolly would stop moving his feet. So he's so worried about reaching out at the guy, the feet wouldn't go with him. So the reach would be too late. Today, what it looked like is the feet went with him. So the reach was more effective, and he was able to get Louvu enough off stride that I think it would have made a difference on the play and allowed Daniels to get rid of the ball. But that's is one where I'd like to watch that one again, just see, did I see that right? Because that's how I processed it initially, for sure. Then I watched him against Von Miller, was fine. In that 11-11, also watch Chris Paul, this time power up against Javon Kinlaw, use that strength of his. And then there were some times where Jayden Daniels was in the last part of the drill was spending time. The second offensive line was in there with him. And sometimes they do that just to have them get used to his cadence in case they have to go in there with him. And they're very intentional about how they do these groups. So that's one of the things that you want to get used to the cadence just in case you have to go in there in the huddle or go on the field with them, because quarterback cadences are different. And that's why sometimes you'll see a backup quarterback come in and you'll start to see some false starts because they're not used to his cadence, and you can be fooled by that. And so, and the funny thing is, the one guy who got called for a lot of false starts last year was Laramie Tunsil. I haven't seen a lot of those in camp. So anyway, that's it for me, folks. Oh yeah, that's it for me. I got nothing else. That's a practice wrap. I'll be back on Monday with another episode. They practice at 2:00, so I'll do it. It's later in the day again, but I'll be there, and I appreciate you tuning in. I will talk to you next time.